Good morning and welcome to the Advice Matters podcast. I'm James Woods, Chief Exec at Citizens Advice. And today we're going to be tackling a topic which touches on everything from education to work, healthcare to everyday life: digital inclusion. For millions, being offline means being left behind. But with the government's new Digital Inclusion Action Plan launched last week, there's a renewed focus on tackling this head on. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Lee Pitcher, local MP, who's here to talk to us about the government's vision and how this plan will be delivered. We're also joined by students from Sheffield University, Holly and Isabella. So thank you for joining us today, Lee. Why do you think digital inclusion is such a key issue at this moment in time? And what's driving the government's renewed focus?
Great, yeah. So thanks for having me, James, and lovely to meet you too, Holly and Isabella. So I guess for me, the world is changing, and it's changing dramatically in many ways, globally and locally, right here in Yorkshire, because whatever happens globally affects us. And I know that technology is moving at such a fast pace that when that happens, of course, innovation and research and development is amazing because it helps create change and spark new ways of doing things. But at the same time, culturally and our habits and our understanding of how we use some of that technology is just not moving at the same pace as it's been produced. And that is a massive challenge for us because, as I say, loads of positives, but the kind of negative side of that is that we see that it can start to create an unfairness within society. And for me, digital inclusion is absolutely about equity and it's about fairness. And what we can't do is see people being left behind in our society because they can't use or they can't access the hardware or the software or the tools that are available to them. And that's in every single area, whether we're looking at health, education, whether we are looking at work, school, it's massively important. And that is why there's a big focus on it at the moment. If I can give an example, I was at Hatfield Community Library just this week, and I was with a group of people in a committee meeting, and one of them is an old age pensioner, retired, and I've started getting emails in to my inbox about the fact that checks in the future at banks are becoming less and less likely to be able to be used. And some banks, I think, have already maybe stopped those. And that, when I was speaking to that person at the library the other day, they were so worried about that because, people are moving online, doing their banking online, and yet they feel like they're now a second-rate citizen in society. And that's the words they used, a second-rate citizen. And that just can't happen. It can't happen. So that's why it's important. That's why the government needs to tackle it now. And that's why we need to work together with people like the Citizens Advice Bureau to do just that.
Thank you, yeah. And every day we see how the practical impacts of digital inclusion, whether it be applying for benefits, applying for jobs, accessing healthcare. I feel like the problem at the minute is I understand why services are going digital, but what is important is it should be digital by choice. The services shouldn't be digital by design because, like you say, if checks become obsolete, how does the gentleman you spoke about do it? Because there's not an abundance of banks that you can go into either. So I think it's a real issue.
Yeah, we've got 10 million people in the UK who don't have training in basic digital skills. In South Yorkshire alone, we know that digital poverty is absolutely huge. I think it's around about 34%. So you're quite right. We can't design our new world around being digital. We have to design it based on what a resident or a customer needs in order to be able to have all of those opportunities that are available to everyone else. And that is massively important.
Yeah, so I know you talked about a lot of new technologies arising and things like that. What would you say are the government's top 3 priorities when it comes to younger people who are growing up with those new technologies to make sure they're not left behind?
Yeah, great question. So of course, we launched the Digital Action Plan just last week. There's 3 key parts to that. One is, access to the tools in the first place. If you don't have the laptops, the computers, the phones, then how can you even get into the digital world and use it. And I've just talked about the levels of digital poverty that's around. So there is a big piece in that action plan around how we can repurpose some of the hardware that we've got within government and public services, and using Citizens Advice Bureau to support with the dissemination of that is hugely important to us. So that's a big one. And of course, the digital inclusion networks, of course, as well. The other one is around skills, and we've done a massive review as part of Skills England at the moment. We're very conscious that the world and the UK is very much going through this transition now towards digital, and therefore, when we're in school, when we're in college, we're off to university, whether you're doing apprenticeships, there is a need to make sure that that digital training is at the core of everything that we do going forward, so people feel knowledgeable and enriched in terms of their education, and feel comfortable and confident in using digital stuff. And I guess the third bit is, how do you remove those barriers that exist for young people? And what I mean by that is barriers to being able to access some of those key services. So whether that be health or educational services online. And we find that particularly in disadvantaged areas or rural areas, and my constituency has, very, very tight urban areas, but also big kind of agricultural areas as well. How do you make sure that young adults are able to access everything online that they need to be able to live a day to day?
Thank you. Locally, we've been proud to lead on digital inclusion work not just in Doncaster, but from a regional perspective. And we launched the South Yorkshire Digital Inclusion Network last year. This has a three-pronged approach in terms of getting people digitally included. So we offer digital advice appointments. We offer a Connect and Learn course, which is like a back to basics skill 6 weeks course. And as part of this course, we coach you how to use a tablet, and then we give you a tablet at the end of the course. And it also includes, which leads into what you mentioned, a device and data bank scheme. So we try to obtain refurbished laptops so we can give to people, and just the impact that has was really significant. I remember there was a client that we spoke to in intake who didn't have access to the internet because she couldn't afford it. She wasn't claiming the right benefits, and she wanted to apply for a job, but the offender told her about, but she didn't have the access to the online facilities to be able to do that. So what we were able to do through this scheme is, through the digital advice appointments, we were able to give her some data, give her a device, support her with the application, make sure she was claiming the right benefits, and then through that she got a job. And what we tend to do is we try and touch base with them a couple of weeks later, and she said that not only did we support with that and she was now working, but it also allowed her son, who was at school, to do the homework and things and do some research on the internet.
Which is so
about
amazing,
things
yeah, absolutely amazing.
But I really feel it's a good example of like how far-reaching digital inclusion can be.
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant, and that kind of service is life-changing. There are people I meet on a day-to-day basis who need a little bit of hope in their lives, and the fact that Citizens Advice are there, and you offer, I guess, a safe space for people to come into with, a warm, friendly team with the knowledge to be able to work with them and support them and coach them in that safe space. It just makes all the difference. And without a doubt, that kind of, I guess, that kind of focus that you can give, but in a really caring, attentive way, that will mean so much to those people and their families, and we'll be able to support them sustainably forevermore. Yeah. So it's not just the difference it makes at the time. It is about the difference that makes to them in terms of their confidence, in terms of the job that they've got, in terms of being able to then bring in their salary. It will make a massive difference, James. So honestly, what you do is just fantastic.
Thank you. Do you think that type of project could be a blueprint that the National Digital Inclusion Action Plan could scale up effectively?
Yeah, without a doubt, because this is about. I honestly believe this. The best way to work with our communities is to be within the community, and what I mean, and what that really means for me is that you respond without a doubt. The world's built on relationships. Yes, we've got procedures and processes and all of this sort of stuff, but the world is built on having really strong relationships. And if you've got people that are rooted within your community, like Citizens Advice are, and they are people who you look at and you see, and they kind of represent the person that you are, you feel more comfortable to talk to them. You're more comfortable to ask them questions. You're more comfortable to try things out and experiment. And I think, therefore, it has a much greater chance of success. And that should absolutely be something that you can scale up, because, as I say, that is about having people within the community who are there to champion you. And we have those amazing people right the way across the country.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think being that trusted community group, whether it's ourselves or whether it's somebody else, is key to the success of the rollout of this type of action plan.
Yeah, I think if you have, well, we know it, don't we? If you've got an establishment, the government or a politician, or I don't know, even for some people, the school, it can be quite daunting and it can be quite scary. And having somewhere on the high street or in your local town or your local village where you can walk through those doors and have a really warm welcome from someone that really gets you and gets your area and gets what makes you tick and gets what what you worry about and what you're nervous about, makes all the difference.
So how do you think young people can best get involved in their communities to help others improve their digital skills?
Yeah, so I think there's loads of opportunities, aren't there? So one is to volunteer. There's loads of opportunities around to volunteer, to use your skills. So at the local libraries, where there's often facilities for people to go in and be able to use various digital services. Going into Citizens Advice, I'm sure, James, you'll be more than welcome into to lots of people to come in and support. And there's loads of organisations and charities out there who often want volunteers to come in and help them. So I think volunteering is a great way of doing that. Of course, you can become a digital champion, which is much more of a kind of like an informal, formal role, where you've you yourself could be mentored and increase your skills in that area, and then you go out and support and coach and mentor other young adults and other people, different people across the community as well. So I think that is absolutely a way. And then, of course, for me, and I'm going to have to say this, aren't I, being a politician, but there's youth parliaments out there, aren't there? And there's forums where you have access to and have the voice of an ability to talk to and relate to lots of other young adults. So use those opportunities and get involved in youth parliaments and be able to then help roll out the exact stuff that we're talking about today.
The national plan sets out a bold vision, but how will it be delivered in practice, especially at a local level? And what role do you see for local councils, charities and grassroots organisations?
Yeah, so I think a local government, local council level, there's a lot that can be done. I think being able to provide resources such as Wi-Fi hotspots, very, very important. You need to be able to get on the internet to be able to use those services. Providing the facilities for people to be able to come in, so welcome facilities across the borough, across the town, across the cities, where people can come in and use computers and other devices, I think is really important. I think there is a role for the councils to promote the work that you do. For example, at the Citizens Advice Bureau, if people don't know that you offer that help and that support, well, then they're not going to come and use it. So I think that's a big one too. I think there's something around a local council is a very central point, isn't it? So the ability to be able to coordinate and distribute hardware, software kind of support from there is really important, like the National Data Bank and so on as well. So I think that's a big one.
That's been a real challenge for us just in terms of the project. We've managed to distribute 150 laptops to people who are digitally excluded, but getting the laptops has been a real challenge, and I'd like to see more pressure put on people like the local authority or even local businesses that have got the ability to change or need to change the laptops on a more frequent basis. It doesn't have to be a top of the range laptop for somebody just to surf the internet to find a job. So I would love to see more collaboration at a local and national level to give us the devices to empower people.
And surely it almost feels like a no-brainer, that, doesn't it?
It feels like an easy
It does
thing
feel like
to
an
do.
easy thing to do. So, and I absolutely 100% agree with you that this is about public, private, and kind of volunteering sectors working together, and that kind of collaboration often creates the best opportunities for success. And there are so many resources out there that I know are not reused. I know that, I come from a business background. I've seen it, and I'm totally with you, James, in terms of how do we make sure that we make those private industries, the businesses, aware that there is this need here and that demand, and then how do we ensure that we get that hardware in to then be able to redistribute. So there is something that I think we can do at a government level about raising that and promoting it, and getting more and more people on board with it.
Is that something you could support with at a local level as well?
Yeah, massively. Yeah. So, I'll do that back in Westminster in terms of all of the other MPs and businesses that I meet on a regular basis. But right here in Doncaster, I can do that too.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
So how would you say that students and schools can actually help to shape the local inclusion plans?
Another brilliant question, and I think you have a massive role to play. Yeah. So you know your friends, your fellow students and people that you work with from school and from college, from when you go out to work, if you're doing an apprenticeship. And therefore, I think you have a massive role to play because you've got a big voice. You've got a much bigger voice than you even realise. People will listen to you because you've got the relationships there and you've got the links. So getting out there as an individual, as a collective, and going and speaking to some of those organisations that might be able to help, get out there and influence and, make people listen and use your voice from a place of knowledge. And what I mean by that is that you know this area and you know what we need. And there's no better way. I always say this, and when I'm in Parliament, I often speak up in the chamber using head and heart. And what I mean by that is your head are like your stats and your figures and the intelligence that you gain from speaking to the Citizens Advice Bureau and others about what's going on in the world. But the other thing that really resonates with people is what comes from your heart. So the stories of how people are impacted by digital exclusion, for example, you have that because you talk to your friends and family all the time. So feeding those stories into local organisations that could help with supplying hardware that could be recycled, upcycled, massively important.
With you saying that you speak about it in the Commons and things like that, have you been in contact or spoken to the other MPs in Doncaster to really take like a unified approach to tackling digital exclusion?
We've had the discussion actually together. We've had this discussion at the Chamber of Commerce, actually in front of a big audience as well. I think James might have even asked me a question about it. So at the time, but absolutely. And also I've asked the Prime Minister about it. Yeah. So I was at Prime Minister's questions a couple of weeks ago. And one of the amazing things that we're doing is try to get rid of what we call the 8 a.m. scramble for a doctor's appointment. Like on a Monday morning, everyone's, if you've been a bit poorly over the weekend, everyone rushes to ring up to try to get that appointment. And you're suddenly 31st in the queue. And by the time you get through, you can't get an appointment. So we try to get rid of that by evening that out throughout the week. And of course, adding more doctor's appointments going forwards. But my worry with that is that for those people that need to see a doctor face to face by walking into the surgery to even book their appointment, there is an absolute fear out there that by trying to get rid of that 8 a.m. scramble and not being able to use the phone and try to move it onto a digital platform, that will exclude quite a lot of people. And there was a real nervousness. So I actually asked the Prime Minister that great initiative, brilliant that we're doing it. But actually, what about all those people that are worried that we are going to try to now force people online to book their appointments and they can't do it? But he did give me assurance and guarantee me that is not what this will do. So it doesn't remove that ability to be able to talk to somebody on the phone, for example. And it's not about pushing everyone onto the internet to book your appointments.
I think that's a really key issue. As much as we're trying to champion digital inclusion, services and particularly things like healthcare, access to healthcare, it's got to be digital by choice. So yeah, I think that's key. We do know that people struggle with healthcare services because we see it in the survey data that we collect and also the appointments that we see. In your view, does digital inclusion connect with wider poverty and inequality?
Well, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. The reason I stopped to reflect on that is because I know, when I was growing up, James, I think we've talked about this before. So I was homeless for a period as a child. Yeah, and I know that living in that world back then, just access to a book or the ability to listen to the radio made a huge difference to my life during that period, because what that did was it removed a feeling of helplessness for me, because I could get lost in a book and start to dream and drink big and stuff. It also allowed me to I guess not feel so isolated and not so on my own. And I think with digital exclusion comes a feeling of isolation and a feeling of maybe being on your own, a feeling of why have other people got it and I haven't got it, and I'm missing out and I'm losing out on those opportunities, and why should anyone have to miss out on any opportunities? We live in a world where that shouldn't be the case.
What we tend to see with the data and the clients that we speak to is not having that digital access, it does trap you in, it shuts the door to like jobs, opportunities, educational improvement, accessing the benefits that you're entitled to. So it's a real barrier from our perspective in terms of like the pathways to work.
Yeah,
like it's a real barrier to that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, it is. It absolutely is. And then actually, if you overlay on that, people with disabilities. So if you haven't got a lot of money and you haven't got access to some of these tools, and then on top of that you've got a disability as well, my word, how difficult is that then to try to move forward and have those opportunities? Real life experience for me is that my wife is visually impaired. She has had a degenerative eye condition. It's meant that she started her career. She has been able to work her way up in her career through a career path. She's been very, very successful. And at each stage of, I guess, as each year's gone on, her eyes have deteriorated. But what that's meant was, because she's already in a role and has been very successful, the opportunities for her have been there to be able to adapt at each stage. Working with her organisation have been really, really supportive to provide her with some of the tools and the innovations that are out there to be able for her to continue to work and fulfill her role really, really well. So, and that's everything from having audio on your computer system to actually being able to work at home, which a lot of people can't do because they haven't got access to the internet. So, but I cannot absolutely imagine what it would be like right now if Julie had the level of disability that she has now, if she had just been starting off and we were back where we were when we were 18 with no money, and how absolutely hard that would be. I just can't understand how challenging that would be. So really, really, I think, supremely important that we do understand the difference it can make having the support through people like the Citizens Advice, and how we must always consider access to tools for young adults that are starting off, but also people who just don't have a lot of money at the moment to be able to buy their own stuff to get them kick-started on that path.
Thank you for sharing that. I feel like it's an important real life story. Off the back of that then, is this a really good opportunity to link digital inclusion with things like anti-poverty strategies or pathways to work strategy that's been recently announced as well? Is this a good opportunity to try and include digital inclusion as a key facet in those plans?
1,000,000%. So, of course, at the heart of all of the policies that are coming out at the moment is around equity and it is around access. It's around opportunities for all. I mean, we say that, we mean that. I mean that, from the bottom of my heart. Opportunities for all is absolutely fundamental, most definitely, and that is something that I can absolutely, bang the drum about when I go back to Westminster and I'm speaking to people like Bridget, the Minister for Education, when I'm speaking to people like Wes Streeting around the Minister for Health, and we're obviously moving from analog to digital. We talk about that a lot at the moment, but for sure, it has to be considered and thought about, but proactively, in the planning side of things, right up front, so that we make sure that whatever we put in place, whatever structures, whatever ideas that we've got, at the very heart, it is thinking about digital inclusion as a subset of inclusion overall.
That's really pleasing to hear.
So, considering just how important the digital world is then, do you think that free access to the internet should be considered a basic human right in the UK now?
Oh, great question. What a great question. And that's not one I've got an immediate answer to. My view is that it is the thing. It's never going to go away. Yeah, we are going to move more and more, aren't we, to a digital platform. Whatever we do, it's kind of like a snowball now. It's moving and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's fundamental in work and in all of those stuff that we talked about. So I guess we probably will be moving towards it being a fundamental kind of right to access that we need. So yeah, it's certainly something that I'll take away and think about more going forwards. But yeah, great question, actually.
Yeah.
Organisations like the Good Things Foundation recently highlighted how digital exclusion is also a health issue. If people can't access GP appointments, order prescriptions, or navigate the NHS app, they do risk poorer health outcomes. We have briefly touched on this as in some of the things that you've said. But how can we ensure that the digital transformation of the NHS doesn't widen health inequalities? And should digital inclusion be part of health and care planning?
Yeah, so of course we've announced a health and social care plan that looks at not just what happens in the next year or two, with kind of short-term actions and interventions that we need to make, but longer term as well. So we are planning over 10-year periods now, and we've been out to consultation recently around what are the things that we absolutely need to consider to make sure that the NHS, but health and social care generally, are there to support citizens now and in the future. So without a doubt, I do believe that digital inclusion has to play a part and be a thread right the way through that process. So as I say, that the consultation is there at the moment, and I think there's an opportunity for me, for you, for Holly, for Isabel, everybody that's here today, and all of those people that we talk to when we leave this room, to make sure that we're feeding in constantly to ensure that it remains kind of top priority and it's being thought about.
I feel like what we see locally is it's not that people don't want to use the internet, it's that they can't, or they don't have the skills, or in most cases they don't have the confidence to do it. So I feel like this is why the Connect and Learn courses and the project as a whole is so important and has had such a big impact. It's because it gives people the confidence that you can do this, you can navigate it, you can navigate the digital world. Yeah.
I mean, we know, don't we, that there's a lot of young adults at the moment who are not employed and not in training, and I think a big part of that is it does come back to confidence, without a doubt, and I think that's why the work that you do in, because it's not just about the training, and I think that's what we're getting at here, isn't it? You could often say, well, I've not been trained in that. It's not about the training. A lot of it is about your personal resilience and your ability to walk through those doors, having not done that maybe before, or been too scared to do that before, to sit down with somebody and being shown something that feels quite alien at times to you, particularly if you've not been brought up ever without any kind of computer knowledge or hardware around you, and a lot of people have. I've just talked about 10 million people that don't have access to basic tools to use digital services. I do think that the ability to provide somebody with the confidence is essential. But what that requires are great people and role models like yourself and all of those teams that work at the Citizens Advice and the Digital Inclusion Network that give people that confidence and fellow students to be somebody you can relate to and you feel comfortable with. So hugely important.
So at sort of the national level, how are you ensuring that the sort of local support and things like that specifically are able to help like older people with disabilities to use things like health services safely and confidently?
The fact that I'm here today and I can talk about a digital inclusion kind of action plan tells you that the government realises that there is an absolute need for it. And it's not an action plan that is just focused on one part of society, as in like young adults or people that are retired or people that are not in work. It is a full comprehensive kind of umbrella action plan that's there to support everybody. The fact that we're here today talking to you about it tells you that it means a lot to us locally and nationally. So I guess we're getting out, or we're speaking to people, we're making sure that it's fed back into central government. And what that means is it's then fed into the policies and it is fed into the procedures. And then that basically disseminates back out. And that enables us to make sure that when we are thinking about health in the future and what, analog to digital means, what it means in terms of access to systems, when we are thinking about employment and work and pathways to work, it makes sure that I'm able to feed in on behalf of us all of those things that we talked about today. So again, it's picked up as part of the policy and the procedure and the rollout. What I would say is that is all brilliant and massively, massively important. But a policy is on a piece of paper. And what you then need to do is make sure that the implementation of that is brilliant. And then once it's implemented, that you keep refreshing it and keep going back to it, so it becomes sustainable and just part of our culture to be digitally inclusive all the time. And cultural change takes a long time, and that's why it needs some resource to make sure that there are people there supporting the implementation of that process right the way from start to finish. And that doesn't necessarily need to be new government resource or additional people, but it could be that and the way that we've talked today, that is done via really trusted, reliable, experienced role models like Citizens Advice.
Yeah, no, that's really important. And from your perspective, what does success look like for this action plan?
Well, if you could put me in a time machine and fly me 10 years in the future, 20 years in the future, and then I'm looking at what's happened, I would love to see that as a local area, as a region, as a nation, we've got people of every demographic who has access to the hardware that they need, that has access to the software that they need, and therefore have the ability to I guess live their day-to-day lives with the peace of mind that should they need to be able to access a service, they can do that and they feel trained and competent in doing that. However, the flip side of that is there is always going to be people that need, as you say, that kind of much more tailored support. You can't just have one size fits all for everyone. So, there will be people who won't need to be able to access or can't access the digital system for other reasons, i.e. not because of poverty, for example, and we need to be able to support them so that they can also continue to live their lives really, really well every day.
That's great to hear. To make this lasting change, and I do agree with what you've said, we need long-term investment across the sector, and a strategy that grows with the technology, I guess.
Yeah.
How do we make sure that digital inclusion doesn't drop off? And also, how do we ensure that projects like this don't come to the end of the funding term and are not continually funded? Because it would be such a shame to have a project like this end because it's not funded when it's making such a big impact.
Yeah. So I think there's a few things. So if I took a really kind of the broader level, in order for us to absolutely thrive as a country, we need growth. That's all you hear about all the time at the moment, isn't it? And it is massively, it's mega important. Growing the economy is massively important, and we've alluded to it today. There is no way that we're going to be able to grow our economy in the future doing it the way that we've always done in the past. And what I mean by that is things have changed so much, innovation has changed so much, and a move to digital means that we have to embrace it, and it will continue to move forward and to progress with everything from what we see today to the kind of stuff that you can do with AI now and in the future. So I don't think it can go away now, if you see what I mean. I think it will have to stay forefront of our mind, because having a digital strategy is fundamentally important for us to be a sustainable country and grow in the future. So I think, I think that in itself means that it will always be kind of forefront of our minds. That's kind of at the sort of the big level. But at a local level, you've got something really special here in terms of what you've achieved. Yeah, in terms of the program that we've put in place, in terms of the people that you've been able to support, the 150 repurposed laptops, for example, that have gone out. What is massively important is, and this is where the hearts and minds come into it, from a mind's point of view, we need to understand the difference that's made, in terms of the outputs. And then once we've got those, we need to shout about them. We need to show people how successful this is. And when people see something being successful, at very little cost, to be frank, at very little cost, compared to what some things can cost to do, it will mean that this concept suddenly becomes something that everyone wants to grab hold of. And there is something for us to do and for me to do to be able to shout about that on the biggest platform in the country.
That'd be fantastic, and we really recognise how important that support is. Because one of the challenges I find as a chief exec trying to bring funding into sustained projects like this is you often get, well, that's been funded, so I don't need to support with that. But with digital inclusion, it intersects so many different aspects of people's lives that I feel like more people should throw into a pot of funding for a digital inclusion project. So it shouldn't just be one funder's responsibility. Oh, they're funding it, so we don't need to. I feel like because of the links that it has to other things, that it should be better funded from more places.
Yeah, I must admit, I'm seeing sort of partnership funding being talked about so much more now in every area, whether that be digital inclusion, but also in the world of environment and flood resilience and drought resilience. All of those things is much more about kind of public and private sector and volunteering sectors working together much more tighter. And I do think there is much more of an opportunity there to maximise that funding pot by working together. And actually, I suppose the role that I've got to play there is how do you help facilitate getting those conversations happening, between private and public kind of sectors, so that the private sector are also thinking a bit differently about how they want to help upskill their own workforce or their workforce of the future, and actually how much more potentially efficient it can be by doing that through these kind of programs with Citizens Advice and others.
I sit on the board of Doncaster Chamber, and there's definitely the feedback you hear from businesses is there is a skills shortage in Doncaster, and I feel like we could support with empowering and upskilling people so that there is more of a confidence and more of a skills base in Doncaster for employers to act on. So I do think that's something that we could look to explore.
Yeah. I mean, look around us today. Now, the talent that we've got in Doncaster in our young adults, we've got that in the room today with us. It's superb, and we do need to tap into that so much more. Just being here today, James, and the people that we're sitting with in this room shows you the amazing talent we've got in our young adults. And I think we have a unique opportunity right now to tap into that talent that we've got, and the pipeline that then gives us for work going forwards. I absolutely love Doncaster, and I obviously love the Isle of Axone, which is the constituency that I look after. And I want to make sure that we nurture that talent and they want to work here and they want to stay here, but I want them to achieve all their dreams as well. So I think there is something about how do we get our businesses, our local businesses, through the Chamber of Commerce, through the work that you do, to kind of work so much closer with schools, so much closer with colleges, the kind of college network that we've got, and really tap into that talent.
So, are there any ways in particular that you think young people like us, can help to keep digital inclusion on the political agenda in the future?
Do you know what? I think you have such a great opportunity to do that. So now I would say this: I do think you've got lots of really wonderful local MPs. I share an office with Sally Jameson, who's the Doncaster Central MP as well, and we do talk about our aspirations for the area on a regular basis, and what we need now and in the future, and how we support. Come and talk to us, come and see us, knock on our doors, make sure that you are taking that opportunity, not to be afraid to come, because we want people to come and talk to us. So do that and encourage others to do the same. And also just, you can do that in so many ways. So you can, we can arrange to come and talk to you. You can come to Parliament to see us in Parliament and know what it's like. And when you're in Parliament, we can introduce you to some of the people that have an immediate influence in this world in terms of the policies that we make in the future. Raise it in to the youth parliament as well, and make sure that they are pushing it. I guess what I'm saying is just take every opportunity to either talk or to write to us or to use digital and email us as well, and keep it on the agenda for us. Yeah. And I guess with projects like this, the funding patterns and the way that money is kind of delivered to you in order for you to be able to do the program is massively important. And I'm aware, James, that the funding for this comes to an end quite soon. Is that right?
Yeah, it was a 2-year project, and it comes to close towards the end of this year.
Okay, and that's NHS kind of funded
yeah.
at the moment. So for me, I think there is something around, and this is not just with this project, but any business. And I've talked about growth already, I think, today, but certainly you need a level of security, and you need a level of assurance so that you can plan forward. And that's massively important in terms of retaining the staff that you've got that are working in this area and not losing that knowledge and that education. So I think there's something for me around how do I take that away, that challenge, that we've got around the immediate challenge around potential funding coming to an end, and how we get a decision for you as quick as possible so you can start to plan forward, and remove that kind of risk that you're kind of trying to manage at the moment in a kind of ambiguous environment. But I also think that when it comes to funding, that there is that added importance going forwards of making sure that it's not just kind of all eggs from one basket to a certain extent, and that's a good one to use for Easter, isn't it, in terms of a pun, but certainly it's really serious, that, and as one pot kind of goes, what you want to be sure of is that there's still an income being generated and coming in, and revenues coming in. So there is absolutely something for me to consider and work through with the other MPs, like we've talked about today, and the local authority and private business around how we can potentially come together to fund some of this work. It's
definitely my biggest challenge as a VCSE chief exec, is the dealing with what is consistently 1-2 year projects. It's a real challenge. You get a project up like this, get it running, show the impact. It has massive life-changing impact locally. Yeah. And then it comes to an end, or it's due to come to an end, and then they leave it to the last minute to tell you whether it's continuing and stuff like that. So it's one of the biggest challenges. So like moving forward, a push to 3 to 5 year funding bids just gives me the ability to drive the change at a local level in terms of the impact forward. It also means that I can build that into other things that we do, and look for funding pots like myself that can sustain it.
Yeah, and like sitting here and now, I can't promise you that, but what I can absolutely do and commit to is being able to take that away and make sure that I talk to all of the relevant people who kind of make those decisions and look at the funding timescales to see, and certainly to feed in the fact that if we're able to do that over much longer periods, it just gives you so much more ability to manage and to plan. And actually, it tends to be a lot more efficient as well to be able to do that.
I was in Westminster a couple of weeks ago talking to Miata Fambola, the Consumer Energy.
Yeah.
I was trying to make the point that the Home Homes Fund, it's not adequate, and the funding that they give is like on a 2-year cycle. So my energy project is on a 2-year cycle, and like in September when that comes to an end, energy is still going to be an issue in Doncaster, but we don't know
what's next.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah.
It's a real challenge, not just for this funding, but for energy funding, for most projects. The only one that's been consistent is the MAPS project, Money and Pension Fund. That's usually 5 years. So with that one, you can really make an impact. You can try new ways of working. With shorter funding projects, you've got to hit the targets. And it doesn't give you much flexibility. So like on the MAPS project, because we've got that great flexibility, because we know it's over a wider timescale, we're able to introduce things like AI to support advisors. We just don't have the facility to be able to do it on shorter term projects. So they're less efficient. I can see less people generally.
Okay, no, it's good to understand. And I do get it actually. I know that even looking after infrastructure projects as I did before when I was in the engineering world, knowing that you've got funding for 5 to 10 years was actually much more important than So you saying more than 1 year I can understand why it's massively important. So
the local authority are really supportive. We've got a 5-year grant with them, but that just gives us that foundation for like I can kick on from that and really bring in funding that's going to support them with their objectives as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take it back. So I guess what I'm keen to really understand, because you've got to ask me loads of questions today, but if we're talking about digital inclusion and you are a young adult that's about to embark on a whole new amazing world out there. If there was one thing or one ask that you could have of me today in terms of digital inclusion that you think would help those people who are coming up from school and college and going into uni now or apprenticeships, what would it be? What would be the big thing that I could do?
So for me and for what I've been researching as part of my internship so far, I've been looking at, because I think a lot of people have the sort of not misunderstanding, but they think that digital exclusion primarily would affect older people who might not have the skills in order to use certain devices and things. But it also, obviously, as we've discussed today, impacts younger people as well, especially for like university students. The cost of living is very difficult, especially with things like maintenance loans. And I was looking at how maintenance loans increase by a certain percent each year with things like inflation, that sort of thing. But broadband prices move at different rates and often increase at a much higher rate than things like maintenance loans. So I think if that continues, then the divide for younger people, if maintenance loans only increase ever so slightly, but things like the cost of living for university students and broadband prices increase so much and things like that,
so
maybe working
in real terms you're actually much worse off, aren't you?
Maybe for me it would be to I don't know how much work government does in terms of not necessarily capping prices, but just being aware that increase doesn't line up with what, as a university student living away from home, is expected to pay.
That's a really, really good one actually, and it's really specific, but it's something I can get my hands around as well and be able to take back with me. So that's definitely one that I can look into. So yeah, thank you for that. That's brilliant. Thank you, Holly. What about you then, Isabella?
So something I've definitely noticed since the transition from kind of college to university is there's an expectation on students that you will just have the skills across all forms of like technological competencies, and that's not always the case. A lot of young people are kind of restricted to only being able to use phones, and so what I'd really like to see is a stronger kind of foundational framework of digital skills in schools and making sure that at all levels that's implemented, because I think it will better prepare students who want to go on to higher education and on to employment to kind of to succeed.
Brilliant. Yeah. Again, I couldn't agree more. I absolutely couldn't agree more. We always talk about English and maths, don't we? Yeah. And yet the basic foundation, I think, of coming out of education at the moment and moving into a world of work, in many jobs that we've got, requires some degree of digital use. So I think that is really, really important. And actually, even if you are not moving into a job or a career that requires significant amounts of online kind of services, actually your day-to-day life absolutely does. And what you do in your day-to-day life obviously helps you build your normal resilience to then be able to thrive. So I think, it's complementary, isn't it, in terms of being able to have those very, very basic skills, but across a much more broader range of digital. So again, something I can definitely take away and talk to all the relevant people about. James, what's your big ask then? Go on.
So I think it's more of a broader ask than anything. It's like, can we make sure that services are not digital by design?
Yeah.
That people have got digital choice. If you want to, you can be. And if you want to, we can support you to, but you don't have to.
Yeah, okay. Great. And actually, can I ask you about something that somebody told me about the other day? So they were talking about some children who had been very much kind of at the early years stage during COVID pandemic. And actually, they were from families who did have access to lots of digital equipment and online services, and therefore they were able to study online and so on. But then, since they've come back into the classroom, when they're sat in the classroom and there's a whiteboard, or there's hardware in the room, like laptops or tablets and stuff like that they can use, when the teacher's talking to them, they can't take their eyes off the whiteboard because they think that's the only way that they can learn. So it's actually gone totally the opposite way, in that the children can't focus for long enough on the teacher and the learning that they're trying to give, because they can only concentrate on looking at a screen.
That's interesting.
So it's, I know that's totally different to what you've just, but I just find it fascinating. It's a fascinating world that we're in, isn't it? Absolutely fascinating. And I think the reason I raise that is because when you say it has to be, you can't model it on one scenario, what we need to do in the future. It has to address the actual challenges and the issues. It does require so much more thinking end to end.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I do think that some of the offshoots of COVID and the pandemic and the time where digital was almost forced onto us. I know we had a massive turnaround in how do we provide face-to-face advice when we can't do the face-to-face aspect of it. So I definitely recognise that that's had a lasting impact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. Thank you for that. Just wanted to raise that because I just, I heard about it the other day. I was like, wow. It's
interesting. Because the feedback we get from staff is like, we don't like the training that you do, because a lot of our training is now online from Citizens Advice, because it's a stupid way to do it.
Yeah.
But a lot of my generation and then the staff that we employ are very much saying we want a physical trainer, we want a lesson. So it's interesting that the generation that grew up during the pandemic may veer away from that.
That might only be one child's example. It might be that one individual, but I can't remember who told me, but there was giving me as an example. Yeah,
I think a lot of people in general struggle to focus more than ever when they're trying to complete work. I mean, independently, like I was thinking about this the other day. I'm completing my work on a laptop, but then I have my phone right by me that's constantly going off, and like keeping attention and actually like being productive in the face of new technologies and having to rely on online platforms rather than in-person stuff is very challenging.
There's no switch off time though, is there either?
No.
There's no
I
switch
find
off
myself
time.
constantly in front of a screen, and if I'm not in front of that screen, I feel unproductive. And I think it's really hard to distinguish between kind of like the personal versus the working sphere online as well, and it all just sort of merges into one. And that was an issue in COVID, I know, for a lot of people, but even now, because we've transitioned to so much more online, it's difficult, and mental health stuff alongside that, because of being online so much, definitely is.
I do think that kind of that ability to have your own downtime has changed unbelievably.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I don't know about how old you are, James. You're a lot younger than I am. But when I used to leave school, I'd go home. The only way that anyone could contact me then was via a desk phone. Yep. So I'd pick that up, and that's the only one that someone could ring you. Yeah,
I'm
and
very
talk to you.
envious of that because
Yeah.
I work hours that I probably
Yeah.
shouldn't be working just because I've got access to
Yeah.
work emails,
Yeah.
certain stuff like that, and that downtime and that switch off time, I don't take advantage of it as much as I should because there's a constant demand, and
Yeah.
having the access to it,
Yeah.
it's too freely available.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's weird because in many ways, like we talk about the ability to form relationships now is so different in that there's a lot of talk, isn't there? Like people are a bit more worried about having face-to-face kind of discussions and some of those kind of skills because of everything's gone much more digital. But then the flip side is, as I say, I was at school, I'd come home. The only way I could then talk to anyone was to pick up a phone. And that didn't happen very often because everyone else your mum was only on the phone for hours. And, but then you just switch off. You just totally switch off. Whereas now that relationship from school just continues into your home because all your friends, and everyone that you want to talk to are still there, like chatting to you and asking you about something to do with school. And you can never get that kind of personal time. So it's, different world we live in.
Lee, you mentioned some of the challenges you had growing up as a child. Do you think you would fall into the digitally excluded category?
100%. Yeah, without a doubt. I had the most amazing mum, amazing sister, loving family, but actually we didn't have much money at all. And I think if it had been like that now, I can't imagine how much more difficult it would have been to try to pull myself out of that world that opened up those opportunities for me. Yeah, I would have definitely been one of those children who didn't have access to the iPad or a computer or an iPhone. It just wouldn't have happened because we couldn't afford it. So as I say, we had no possessions left. I was in a room for I don't know how many months, but we literally had a double mattress on the floor. My mum and sister. That's what that's where we slept. So, and I did my GCSE. I did my GCSEs, sat on a bed, doing my coursework. That's what I did. But back then, your coursework was sat there with a pen and paper. So that was I was able to do that. If I think about that now,
it'd be a very different story.
I can't imagine. I just cannot imagine how you kind of move out of that space really. So yeah,
it's a real challenge, and I feel like internet. It brings back to the question Isabel asked about: should it be free, or should it be? Should there be better social tariffs for those that don't have the ability to pay for it? Because it's often the first thing that people don't pay because it's an easy. I need to feed my kids. I'll not pay that this month. I'll not pay this. It's from a debt advisor perspective, it's usually one of the first things that they fall into debt with or just cut off, and it's. I feel like they don't realise how important it is to their life because you think, it's just my internet, I can live without it. But in today's society, living without it's becoming more and more of a challenge.
I guess it's almost like that's a vicious circle, though, isn't it? Because you're taking away the one thing that can actually give you the platform and the boost that you need to springboard off to actually, to bounce back and build resilience. So, no, I get that. I mean, I have to say, I do want to say this because I never felt. Because I had so much love from my mum and that encouragement, I never felt like I lacked anything. But so I do want to say that and be really, really clear about that because, my family are just absolutely amazing and they got me to where I am today, but it would have been unbelievably much more difficult.
Thank you for sharing that. Thanks for joining us today, Lee. It's encouraging to see there's a renewed focus on digital inclusion and that community organisations have got a vital role to play. And as Citizens Advice, we'll continue to champion digital inclusion, not just in Doncaster, but across South Yorkshire. So thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure. Lovely to meet you all as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.